I found out my boyfriend and sister were secretly dating. I decided to get revenge. Best Reddit. I found out my boyfriend and sister were secretly dating. I decided to get revenge. And make them pay for how they treated my life has a tendency of delivering unexpected turns, don't you think? I never imagined that I'd be here sharing my heart with strangers online. Up until a month ago I believed I had everything figured out. I'm a 48-year-old woman who lives in New York City. In addition to having a close-knit family and a loving boyfriend, I was the vice president of a prosperous advertising agency right now. Nothing is certain to me now. It all began on what appeared to be a typical Tuesday when I realized I had left my USB drive at home. I was in a hurry to attend to a crucial customer appointment. Not a huge thing, is it? I requested my sister Sarah, 44F, who was spending the week with us, to email me the files when I contacted her. I had no idea how much one small request would rock my world. My heart stopped when I opened Sarah's email. I was staring at private messages between her and my boyfriend Tom, 45 me, rather than my job files. I initially assumed it was some sort of twisted prank, but the terrible reality dawned on me as I read through the innumerable conversations. For the previous 6 months my sisters and my boyfriends had been having an affair. I had the feeling that I would get sick. I could hardly grasp my phone since my hands were shaking so much. In the hope that I was misinterpreting those messages, I must have read them a dozen times. However, everything was in black and white, including the inside jokes, the flirty banter, and the in-depth accounts of their covert meetings. How I handled that client encounter is beyond me. With my mind spinning from everything I had learned, I was operating automatically. I hurried home as soon as it was over, resolved to face Tom. He was sitting on the couch watching TV as if nothing were wrong when I stormed into our flat. Boiled at the sight of him, so careless and uninformed. How long? I threw my phone at him and demanded it. After a little period of confusion, on his face became pale as he came to terms with what I had witnessed. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about, but I could see the remorse on his face. Don't lie to me. Tom, I spit out, I noticed the messages. Sarah and you for what? How long has this been occurring? Initially made an effort to deny it, but as I recounted passages from their conversations he broke down. He finally said 6 months in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. It simply occurred. We didn't intend for it to be said. But I interrupted. I didn't want to listen to his justifications. 6 months, a half a year of deceit and treachery. He was with my sister when I was working late, assuming he was watching TV at home. I became physically nauseated at the prospect. I said, "Get out of my voice." Trembling with hurt and rage, "I don't ever want to see you again." Tom remained silent. I was left alone in the apartment we had shared for the previous 2 years. After he took a few items and departed, I started crying as soon as he left. I wept till my eyes were dry. After that I sat there feeling empty and numb. How could they harm me like this? Since I was a young child, Sarah has been my best friend and sister growing up. We had shared everything: dreams, clothes, and secrets. What about Tom? He seemed like the one. We discussed getting married and creating a future together. Everything felt like a lie now. I gave Sarah a call the following day to comprehend why she would betray me, and this way I wanted to hear it directly from her. I could tell she already knew. When her face showed up on my screen, she appeared as though she hadn't slept because of her swollen red eyes. She began, "I'm so sorry," but I interrupted her. "Why?" With a chilly tone I inquired, "Why would you harm me in this way?" As she attempted to explain, Sarah broke down and started crying. She sobbed, "I didn't meant for it to happen. Tom and I simply clicked. I believe I'm in love with him." But I know that's no justification for her remark. Struck me like a to the body. Are you in love with him? In love with my boyfriend, my own sister? In my stomach it was like a knife twisting, feeling more alone than ever. I hung up the phone without saying anything else. I contacted our parents, John, 55 million, and Mary, 53 fit, since I wanted to talk to someone in order to make sense of this mess. I believed that they would be sympathetic and supportive, and that they would be outraged on my behalf rather than. Their response made me feel even more deceived. My mom said, "Oh, honey." After I told them everything, "Sarah probably didn't mean to cause you any harm. You are aware of her tendency toward impulsivity." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Intend to cause me pain? She spent 6 months making love with my boyfriend now. Now my father added, "Laytun, do not rush. The most essential thing is family. If you all get together and have a conversation, I'm confident you can resolve this. Figure this out." Were they sincere? How could I simply forgive and go on from something like this? They obviously cared more about maintaining order than they did about my feelings. On top of everything else, their response felt like yet another betrayal. As the days went by, and I saw that I alternated between intense fury and debilitating melancholy, I was unable to eat or sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom and Sarah smiling together over their deception of me. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal. I wasn't interested in playing happy families, but my parents kept calling to attempt to set up a family gathering to sort things out. How could I ever have faith in Tom or Sarah again, knowing what my sister had done? How could I sit across from her at the dinner table? Something inside of me exploded during one of these phone conversations with my mother when I cut her off. She was rambling on about forgiving others and moving on. "No," I firmly answered, "I won't act like everything is fine. They cannot be forgiven for what they did. But it's not healthy to hold on to anger, sweetie," she objected. "You must. I need my family to realize how much I'm hurting." I interrupt, "But I'm done because it's obvious that won't happen. I've had enough of Sarah. I've had enough of Tom, and this is the end of our talk. With my heart pounding, I hung up. I had clarity for the first time. Since this whole nightmare started, I had had enough of being the victim. I had to take charge of my life once more. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer and called in sick to work the following day. As I told my narrative, Jessica 50 degrees Fahrenheit listened calmly and then leaned forward, her eyes concentrated and alert. You have choices, and you have been wronged, she continued. Given your professional relationship with Tom, we can investigate this from a number of perspectives, including emotional distress, breach of trust, and potentially even workplace. I sensed hope, something I hadn't felt in weeks, as Jessica outlined possible tactics. Hope for justice, not for forgiveness or reconciliation. I wish I could transform this suffering into something strong. How about Sarah? I inquired if there is anything we can do to stop her involvement. Jessica gave a slow nod. Even though dealing with family members is more difficult, there are still options available to us. We can at least make sure that any assets that the family may have in common are safeguarded. That afternoon, as I walked out of Jessica's office, my head was buzzing with potential solutions. I had a sense of direction and purpose for the first time since I found out about the affair. I was no longer only a victim, I was a lady. With a purpose, I took a seat at my computer that evening and began planning. I started by making a list of all the things I wanted to do. I wanted to protect my financial future. Tom's unethical behavior at work, make sure Sarah was held accountable for her activities, and demonstrate to my parents that I wouldn't be coerced or held responsible. I felt an increasing sensation of empowerment as I typed. I had indeed been harmed, I had indeed been deceived. However, I refused to let that define who I was. Rather than who I was going to turn this suffering into motivation to start a new phase of my life. I was aware that the path ahead would not be simple. There would be more conflicts and challenging discussions. It's possible that my family won't comprehend or agree with my choices, but I felt strong. For the first time in weeks, I was resolved. I made the decision to return to work tomorrow. I would take a proud stance and begin implementing my goals. Sarah and Tom believed they could treat me badly and yet get away with it. My parents believed they could use guilt to get me to ignore everything. They were all going to find out how mistaken they were. I noticed myself in the mirror as I shut down my laptop and prepared for bed. The devastated, deceived victim I had been for the previous 2 weeks was not the lady staring back at me. She was prepared to face any obstacles because she was a fighter. I said in a whisper to my reflection. Watch out, world. I'm returning stronger than before. For the first time since this whole experience started, I felt completely at peace as I turned off the light and went to bed. I was eager to begin the first day of my new life, which was tomorrow. I'm going to talk to you. Reddit. Have any of you had a similar situation? How did you respond to it, and how do you feel about my revenge plan? Is it excessive, or is my desire to hold them all accountable for their actions justified? As I start my new path, I would value any guidance or assistance. You might provide an update in 1 or 2 weeks. Have passed since my last post, and I would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their guidance and encouragement. Your remarks have been a lifesaver for me at this trying time. I'll give you an update because a lot has happened. The revenge strategy comes first. After speaking with my attorney Jessica, I made the decision to act in several ways. First, we filed a formal complaint about Tom's inappropriate connection with me and his following romance with my sister with his human resources department. Considering that we are in the same industry, it was a risky move, but I couldn't allow him to get away with it. The reaction was prompt. While an inquiry was conducted, Tom was put on administrative leave. I'll admit that I felt a little satisfied as I watched him being led from the premises with a box of personal belongings. However, it didn't last long. I was struck hard by the fact that my private life was now being used as fodder for office. Rumors about my personal role at work have grown more complex, even though my supervisors have been encouraging. I can sense the sidelong stares and whispered discussions that end when I walk into a room. It's obvious that people are curious about my level of knowledge, my anticipated length of stay, and my stability in managing large counts in an effort to demonstrate that my personal drama won't impact my professional performance. I've poured myself into my work. Things have gotten worse on the family front. Do you recall how my parents pushed for a family gathering to work things out? It was a catastrophe, but it did happen in a quiet room in downtown. Restaurant served as our neutral meeting spot. My pressure shot up the moment I went in and saw Sarah sitting there looking anxious yet somehow defiant. Naturally, my parents were also present, serving as mediators. My father started by saying, "Girls, we're here to talk this out like adults until our family decides how to proceed. Nobody is going anywhere." I couldn't contain my laughter. "Go ahead. Are you serious? There is no way to move past this?" Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "I am aware that what I did was improper. I sincerely apologize. However, shouldn't we at least attempt to resolve this?" With a mixture of anger and incredulity, I turned to face her. "Resolve this? You spent 6 months making love with my partner day after day. You deceived me. What do you want to do? Now pretend it never occurred and give it a hug." Check. Not saying that my mother interrupted. "As a family, we simply want to figure out how to get better. You two have always had a tight relationship," I corrected her, saying we're close to tense in the past. And who is to blame for that? From there the discussion took a different turn. My parents begged, Sarah wept, and I felt numb. It was obvious that they all expected me to put family unity ahead of my personal sentiments and to finally forgive and move on. I had had enough guilt tripping And pointless discussions after an hour with a loud scrape of my chair against the floor I got up on is useless. I remarked, "It appears that you have all determined how this should proceed without taking my feelings into account." "Well, I'm not complying. I'm finished." I heard my mother calling after me as I left, but I chose not to turn around. I disabled their social media accounts and phone numbers that evening, although it was a bold step. I needed time to recover. From their unrelenting pressure, things took an intriguing turn on the Tom front. He contacted me a few days after he was placed on leave, asking me to withdraw my complaint to HR rather than offering an apology or pleading for my forgiveness. He begged over the phone that this may destroy his career. "Can't we deal with this in private?" His boldness astounded me. "Take this in private, similar to how you and Sarah had your 6-month clandestine affair." He was bold enough to sound angry. "That isn't the same. We're talking about my livelihood here," I retorted. "You ought to have considered that before you chose to sleep with my sister. Tom's actions have repercussions. You need to face yours now." I experienced a range of feelings once I hung up. Hearing the desperation in his voice and knowing that he was finally being held accountable for his acts made me feel a certain amount of satisfaction. However, I was also worn out from the drama and the continual reminders of their treachery. At that point, I decided I required a change. A new beginning. I started researching employment prospects in other cities. The idea of uprooting my life was both thrilling and horrifying, but the more I considered it, the more it seemed right. With a Seattle boutique agency, I discovered a good lead. Following a round of interviews, they offered me an offer after being impressed by my experience and portfolio. Although it was a lateral transfer in terms of employment, the opportunity to reinvent myself and the change of environment was invaluable to my supervisor. Was sympathetic but obviously unhappy when I gave notice at work. He questioned, "Are you certain about this? Here you've established a solid career. Don't allow personal problems to pull you away." I was grateful for his care, but I had already made up my mind. "I'm positive." I assured him I need to start over on both a personal and professional level. I was shocked by how many co-workers contacted me to offer their support when word circulated about my upcoming leave. Many of them talked about how they overcame personal obstacles and changed their identities in the middle of their careers. Their words of support made me more determined. I've been going to a therapist to help me process everything. In the middle of this, I have benefited greatly from Dr. Larson's 58 degrees Fahrenheit assistance in processing my anguish and anger. She has assisted me in seeing that although my emotions are true, I must not allow them to control me. During one session, she informed me that while seeking revenge may feel good at the time, it won't make your grief goes away. Living a good life and going on is the best form of retaliation. I'm making an effort to heed her advice and concentrate on creating my new life rather than destroying my previous one. It's not always simple, and sometimes I still feel like my wrath will get the better of me, but I'm getting better as I get ready to relocate to Seattle and pack up my apartment. I'm thinking about how much has changed in only a few short weeks. My sister, my partner, and in a sense my parents have all passed away. However, I've also developed a new feeling of self-resolve I was unaware I am aware that the path ahead will not be simple. It's intimidating to start anew in a new city and start my life over from scratch, but I'm looking forward to the future. For the first time in a long time, I'm interested to see who I'll develop into once I'm not burdened by expectations from my family or betrayal. I hear those who told me to forgive, move on, and take the high road. I no longer seek retribution for its own sake. Yes, I'm working for justice, but more than that, I'm working for my own happiness and mental health. So Reddit, that's the current situation. I'm going to start a new chapter in my life, putting the hurt and treachery behind me. Although I'm anxious, thrilled, and a bit afraid, I'm primarily proud of myself for taking charge of my life. I appreciate all of your help and guidance. You have no idea how much it has meant. After I'm settled in Seattle, I'll provide another update. Good luck to me. Update 2-3 months have passed since my last post, and I'm writing this from my new Seattle apartment with a view of Puget Sound. Every day the view reminds me of my progress. It's exciting and scary to move to a new city in your late 40s, although everything is new. There is a certain liberation that comes with not knowing. Nobody here is aware of my past, my suffering, or my guilt. Whoever I want to, I can be in the best way conceivable. My new position at the boutique agency has been demanding. I'm taking on multiple roles because the team is smaller. I've had to learn new talents and step outside of my comfort zone. As a result, I am gradually forming new friendships. It's a start, even though it's not as good as the close relationships I had in New York. Let's move on to the fallout from my revenge plan. I place that in quotes because in retrospect it was more about justice and taking back control of my life than it was about getting even. In the end, Tom lost his job due to professional misconduct. A history of inappropriate behavior with others co-workers was also discovered during the HR probe. My old employer called me and thanked me for coming forward and apologized for not detecting Tom's action sooner. The repercussions for Sarah has been less professional and more personal. As word of her affair spread, she lost acquaintances, and our parents finally seemed to understand the seriousness of what she had done. She wrote me a tearful letter last week filled with explanations and apologies. She talked about how she had always felt like she was living in my shadow and of her own fears. The letter concluded with an appeal for pardon. For the first time I sensed a tiny fracture in the wall of wrath I had constructed, but I'm still not there, not even close. I haven't replied yet, and I may not do so. Additionally, my parents have begun contacting me more often instead of advocating for reconciliation. They have been helping me adjust to my new life in order to send a housewarming present. My mom even inquired about my address. My own self-change has been the most notable piece, has slowly taken the place of the rage that previously overwhelmed me. Even though I still get angry occasionally, they are becoming less frequent and less severe. This approach has been greatly aided by my therapist Dr. Larson. Forgiveness is something we've been working on, not for Tom or Sarah but for me. She has aided me in seeing that forgiving someone does not include accepting their actions or allowing them to return to my life. It entails letting go of the grip that rage has on me. I've been concentrating on personal development and self-care. I've started taking photography classes, joined a reading group and started doing yoga and meditation. I went on my first date since the whole situation last weekend. It wasn't a life-altering experience, but it was nice to meet someone new. His name is Mark. 52 million. In terms of my career, I'm succeeding in unexpected ways. My enthusiasm for advertising has been rekindled by the new beginning. I presented a campaign that challenged convention last week. We got the account because the client thought it was fantastic. It served as a potent reminder of my value on both a personal and professional level. There have also been difficulties. There are days when loneliness is too much to bear. I long for the comforts of my former existence. Sometimes I wonder why I choose to move away from everything, but then I think back to where I was only a few months ago. Angry, damaged, and caught in a vicious cycle of betrayal and suffering. I know I made the right decision when I consider how far I've come. I want those of you experiencing similar difficulties to know that there is hope. You'll make it through this. You'll discover a strength you never knew you had, and you'll emerge from the experience stronger and wiser, if not unscathed. I have a long way to go. I'm still recovering, learning, and developing, but I'm looking forward to the future for the first time in a long time. What occurred to me no longer defines me. Instead, what I decide to do next does. Reddit, I appreciate you joining me on this adventure. Some of my darkest moments have been illuminated by your encouragement. Although I have no idea what the future will bring, I am certain that I am prepared to meet it head on. When there are noteworthy developments, I'll provide another update. I'll stay here in Seattle until then, appreciating fresh starts and second chances as I watch the sunset over the Sound. Update 3. The adage revenge is a dish best served cold has never felt more fitting as it does now. 6 months after my last update, I've been quite busy, and now my well-planned outcomes are finally materializing. Let's start by discussing Tom. Do you recall his dismissal from our previous employer? But that was only the start. I've been methodically damaging his industry-wide professional reputation. How, thanks to former coworkers who owed me favors, I was able to produce an anonymous blog post that detailed his misbehavior and included censored evidence from our HR department. In the world of advertising, the blog gained a lot of popularity, but I continued posing as a headhunter. I created a phony LinkedIn profile and contacted Tom, promising him interviews at prominent agencies. Naturally, my pals, who were actors, staged these interviews. Tom would arrive, wait for hours, and then be informed that the interview was not planned. This occurred 5 times before he realized what was going on. Last week was the key to using some cunning. I managed to get Tom invited to participate in a large advertising conference. This, he believed, was his opportunity to turn his life around. He was unaware that I had positioned multiple persons in the crowd. They questioned him sharply about his prior misbehavior. When it came time for Q&A, after stumbling and perspiring, Tom bounded off the stage. Since the video became public, there's no longer any prospect that he will be able to recover his career. Let's go on to Sarah with that heartfelt letter. My darling sister believed she might slither her way back in my favor. I chose to let my deeds speak louder than my words. Rather than answer, I employed an excellent PI to investigate her past, and they found a wealth of information. As it happens, Sarah has a history of taking out loans from our parents and never repaying them. I submitted our parents a thorough report that included dates and amounts for each of these loans. They were, to put it mildly, shocked. However, it wasn't all. Additionally, the PI found proof that Sarah had embezzled money from her job. That little issue was resolved when her company's audit department received an anonymous tip when I discovered that Sarah had been lying about her educational background. However, it was the cherry on top. Although she stated on her resume that she had completed her degree, she never did. After making a brief phone call to her human resources department, Sarah was declared unemployed and unemployable. Our parents, on the other hand, at last realized the truth to supposedly clear the air. I called a family gathering. Rather, I showed a PowerPoint that listed all of Sarah's deceptions and manipulations across the years. It was immensely satisfying to see the changes in their expressions, from bewilderment to shock to rage. Sarah is now totally cut off from them, both financially and emotionally. This degree of retaliation may seem extreme to you, but I can promise you that it is just. I almost got destroyed by these people. They attempted to gaslight me into forgiveness, abused my confidence, and diminished my sense of value. Forgiveness is not an option. Despite everything, I've been doing well in Seattle. My new position, I currently lead a boutique agency as its CEO. As it turns out, the owner wanted to retire, and I made him an irresistible offer. It was worthwhile. Even if I had to spend a sizable portion of my savings, now I have the authority to ban Tom and Sarah from a whole industry. My personal life has also changed in an intriguing way. Do you recall the architect Mark? He has his own spiteful streak. It turns out he offered some inventive ways to make his ex-wife's life miserable when she cheated on him. We are now allies in life. And retaliation, being with someone who sympathizes with my suffering and encourages me to take action, is thrilling. In addition, I have established a support group for those who have experienced familial betrayal. I've gained some wonderful allies, and it's been helpful. We encourage one another, exchange tactics, and sometimes even assist one another in plotting retaliation. I adore it. It's like a book club with a twist. Some of you may be wondering if any of this makes me feel bad. The answer is definitely no. I provided Tom and Sarah the opportunity to express genuine regret and make amends rather than attempting to control me and force me to forgive before I was ready. They are now realizing that their acts have repercussions. I want to respond to those of you who suggested that I be the greater person or take the high road. Sometimes it's overrated. Fire must sometimes be put out with fire. I'm not saying that everyone should follow this route, but for me it was essential. This retaliation has been empowering, therapeutic, and well worth the effort. I feel a sense of calm that I haven't experienced in years as I sit in my corner office with a view of Seattle skyline. The rage that used to devour me has given way to contentment. It feels amazing to be in charge of my story. Now remind yourself that you don't have to be a victim if you find yourself in a similar circumstance. You don't know how powerful you are. Don't be scared to use it, but use it carefully. My last update will be this one. I'm ending this chapter of my life by making sure that the people who harmed me never forget what they did, not by forgiving and moving on. I appreciate everyone who has followed my journey. Cheers to fresh starts, delicious retaliation, and the strength that comes from taking charge of your own destiny. Be careful, world. Not only am I back, but I'm returning with a